Yeah, I think that Secretary Antonio Guterres, the reason he is taking this step is because of the ongoing inaction, particularly by Israel's allies, and them providing cover for what's happening. And just the scope of the destruction and devastation we're seeing in Gaza, I think necessitates a larger reaction. My understanding of, given the Security Council and how the UN functions, my understanding is that this may not change much in terms of UN policy or decisions, but it could muster a significant amount of aid and start particular mechanisms around that. And so, yeah, it's definitely maybe a little too late, in fact, for this declaration.
And now the United States is also calling on Israel to limit civilian deaths and displacement, saying too many Palestinians have been killed when it pounded much of Gaza City and also the northern part of Gaza. Is it possible to identify who is a civilian and place them in designated safe zones, or are there other options to keep civilians safe?
Really, the only option to keep civilians safe is for there to be a ceasefire and to begin political negotiations around hostages, around all the other issues that have spurred this latest escalation of violence. Because the fact of the matter is, this is a militant group, right, that is embedded in a civilian population. And there's lots of reporting to suggest by 972 Mag and others that it doesn't seem that the Israeli side necessarily cares about minimizing civilian deaths and civilian casualties. The point, it seems, given this investigation that I'm citing, it seems to just be about generating the greatest number of targets. So even if they're targeting someone who is not that important, the scope of civilian deaths is really tangential to that decision. So as you mentioned, there's been close to 20,000, maybe even more, Palestinians have been killed in the last 2 months, and over 80% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip has been displaced. And even when Palestinians are told to go into particular safe zones, those safe zones are again bombed. So there's really not a way to minimize civilian death given the method of warfare that Israel is undertaking, including, as I said, generating this great amount of targets using AI, using these new technologies, without a political negotiation. So that's where we need to go.
But one would say it's because the civilians are being caught in this crossfire because of the Hamas terrorists who are disguising themselves and hiding among civilians.
I mean, whether or not that's the case, I think that we need to look at the evidence of how Hamas is conducting itself, and there may be evidence to suggest this or anything else. There is international law that needs to be applied. It doesn't even matter how many militants there happen to be. There are rules of engagement around hospitals, around ambulances, around schools, and these have been completely flouted.
Again, Dana, we heard from the State Department that there is a designation of 13 individuals and entities responsible for providing funds generated from the sale of shipment of Iranian commodities to the Houthis in Yemen. What influence does this group, the Houthis, have on the Israel-Hamas war?
So the Houthis and a group like Hezbollah, for example, these kinds of militant groups that exist in the region that are funded and supported by Iran, they attempt to capitalize on these kinds of escalations of violence, to pursue their own interests, to pursue Iran's interests. They obviously won't have much impact in helping actual Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. They are really weaponizing these moments. But what they can have an impact on is generating a greater, wider and regional escalation that we really should think to avoid.